I don't think we can cut our way to prosperity. So the right-wing idea of we simply need to reduce spending, I don't think that that's really going to be the big economic boon that some think it is. But there are areas, including military and defense spending, where I think we really could significantly shrink and reallocate to some of the social programs that I'd like to see.
My understanding with a lot of government spending is that they give budgets, and if the budgets aren't utilized in full, they don't get the same budget for the next quarter or the next year.
Yes.
To me, that seems like a problem.
It's a major problem.
Incentivizes spending.
Yes, there's no doubt about that.
So it seems like there's a lot that can be cut down purely because they just optimize for waste.
Yes. And one of the other things about this is you often will hear people say, hey, instead of money for X in the military, what about money for Y for whatever? And you're hearing it a lot right now where people say, instead of gift cards for undocumented immigrants, what about housing homeless veterans? Great idea to house homeless veterans. A lot of the people talking about this don't actually want to spend the money to house the homeless veterans. They're using it politically, opportunistically now. But the way a lot of these budgets are done are vertically, departmentally. Yeah. You can't just move the money from one to the other after the fact in the way many people are
curious, why do we have that sort of
boundaries?
Why do we have that method for government spending of just like, here's your budget. If you don't use all of it, you can't get more of it.
Lots of corporations have the same thing. So I don't think it's unique to government. I mean, there's, large corporations.
They have marketing budgets. End of Q2, we have to spend
and if you don't use the whole budget, you probably didn't need it. And next year we're going to cut it. I don't think that this is, I think this is a function of large organizations, be they governmental or corporate or nonprofit. I don't think it's unique to government.
But do you think that's just because it's simpler that way? If just like, this is our easiest way to get the job done, and if we waste some money, it's just a cost of doing business?
I think it's a shortcut to try to simplify rather than a situation where we go back to the drawing board. Vivek Ramaswamy, who I'm not a fan of, was talking about zero-based budgeting for every department. Now, he was using it as an excuse to do things I don't agree with, which is like eliminate a whole bunch of departments. Doesn't matter though. The point is doing that rather than just saying, okay, what was the budget last year? Did you use all of it? Great, it goes up 1%. You didn't use all of it? We're cutting it. It's a shorthand to simplify what is really complicated stuff.
I always had an idea that if the government just allocated, even if it's like $10 billion every single year for a team of like the best possible accountants, 1,000 accountants, however many thousands of accountants, just to internally audit the entire, like all of the money that is distributed by the federal government, and then provided like a very succinct and concise letter to everybody to read, and everyone can have opinions on it. Like, why is that not being implemented? I feel like that would actually put some scrutiny into these wasteful organizations.
Who would make the final say, though? Is it like one accountant responsible?
Well, at least
for, like,
it would like
military?
bring some of the stuff to light. Because I remember back when I was in high school, like I was hearing about $22 muffins that were sold to like,
I love that one.
You know what I mean? Or like
it was like a $250,000
$500,000 refrigerator installed in Air Force One, or a $1.6 million public bathroom. It's like,
so there's like three different things here. One, sometimes these anecdotes are used to make broader points that aren't necessarily that useful in figuring out like the big picture. So I know about, the $400 urinal dividers or whatever. Okay, we can look into that. I don't know how bigger picture necessarily that fits into what we're talking about.
it's a symbol.
It's a symbol of something. We can debate of what. The idea of hiring 10,000 accountants. I mean, so the idea of a full comprehensive audit of the federal budget is a great idea in theory. Couple problems with it are, number one, a lot of the people who want to cut the budget dramatically would never go along with hiring 10,000 accountants. They actually want to close entire departments, lay off 20 or 50% of federal workers. So you'll never get them to actually go for it. And then number three, as you're kind of pointing out, is who has the final say and what are the political biases? And it would be, unfortunately, and I hate that we have to be this kind of cynical, unfortunately, it would lead to a lot of the same partisan political infighting that causes the gridlock we already have. So it's an interesting idea in principle, but when you get into the practicalities of how unfortunately government is working right now and the hyper partisanship, I would be kind of naive to say, oh, that'll solve.
Do you think it sounds good in theory?
I think the idea of such an audit does sound good in theory, but if we can't even agree on what the facts are or what government should be actually involved in, which are two things that Democrats and Republicans often don't agree about, what's the point of bringing in the accountants until we know what the target is?
But I feel like there is a majority population that thinks the government does not spend money appropriately. I think that is a majority
for completely
opinion.
different reasons.
Right, I know, and then we can figure out these reasons when we actually have some transparency with how they're spending our money. And I also think on an ethical perspective, it makes sense if someone is taking your money and then they are using it in areas you have no idea where it's going.
I agree
you
with
have
that.
an idea where it's going.
I agree 110% with that. I think the problem is, so there's more transparency. Some people just assume we have no transparency. A lot of them haven't looked it up. I mean, you can look up how
you
money
can
is
look up
spent.
the budget.
I
and everything,
understand
but it's
that
not
sometimes
subcategorized
money
and-
goes missing or it's
Yeah.
not as fine. Was it for urinals or toilets? You know, right? And
Yeah.
so some of these details are not always fully transparent, but a lot more information than some people assume is out there. But the real problem is, even my guess is 80 or 90% of Americans would disagree with how their tax money is being spent for 100 different reasons and in 100 different ways. And getting the consensus is what's really difficult. The ways I think my tax money is being misspent are very different from the ways that other people think my tax money is being misspent.